Dance Arts of Columbia provides fitness fun for everyone from 3 years old to adult. Dance Arts is a good environment where the friendly staff makes you feel comfortable. Dance Arts feels that dance is an art form that you can experience firsthand by learning tap, jazz, modern, musical theater, lyrical, and ballet. Dance Arts urges you to enjoy a sense of accomplishment while getting fit and having fun. For class information, call 875-1569. Dance Arts of Columbia, serving Columbia since 1979.
Good morning and welcome to Radio Friends on this Monday, November the 24th. I've got a very interesting guy with us today, Peter Nye. Good to have you here, Peter.
Nice to meet you, Paul.
Drove all the way down from Kirksville, Missouri to be with us, and
Right.
You listen to KBIA up in Kirksville.
Definitely,
Yeah,
and I'm a dues-paying member.
Thank you. Thank you for that. You've written a book, and this is really a fascinating book, The Fast Times of Albert Champion. Now, Albert Champion, many people know AC spark plugs and Champion spark plugs.
AC Delco.
AC Delco, that's right. This is a guy who was responsible for it all.
That's right.
But how did you come about, and why did you decide to write a book about Albert Champion?
Oh, that's a good question, Paul. I had written a magazine article 20 years ago for Winning International, a magazine based in Brussels, Belgium, with a North American office. And it was a rags to riches story, from bicycle courier to bicycle racer to motorcycle racer to car racer, and then automobile mogul. I thought it was very interesting. He died very suddenly and without any warning at age 49 when he was on a business trip in Paris. It was October 1927. And the French and English accounts are consistent because they said he died in the arms of a man in his hotel room. And after my article was published, I wondered, who was the man in whose arms he died? And where was Albert Champion's wife when he was breathing his final breaths? And that's what put me on the journey to this.
So, who was the man?
Well, he was more of a surrogate father. Albert was 11 years old when his father died, and Albert was the oldest of 4 brothers. And this particular man knew him as a bicycle courier and then breaking into bicycle racing and became more of a surrogate father. Mm-hmm. And Albert's wife, at the time Albert died, turned out to be the younger second wife. Mm. He had thrown over his wife of 20 years, who was his Paris childhood sweetheart. He threw his first wife over for the younger, faster second model, and her married boyfriend beat up Albert Champion and killed him.
And that was that Chevrolet?
No, Louis Chevrolet earlier.
Now, Chevrolet, we're talking about the car, the make of Chevrolet, Louis Chevrolet,
right,
and Albert Champion.
Right, they were 2 Frenchmen, basically.
And they were friends.
Yeah, they were friends and business partners. Albert Champion underwrote Louis Chevrolet. Louis Chevrolet wanted to make race cars. And Louis had given away his name. Ironically, Louis Chevrolet thought nobody was going to buy a car named Chevrolet. His idea of a real car name was Frontenac, after a French governor in representing the royalty of France, mm-hmm. was the governor of Canada, and it had expanded France's holdings from Canada all the way down through the Great Plains states to the Gulf of Mexico. That later made up the Louisiana Purchase. And so Frontenac, in Louis Chevrolet's eyes, that was a real name.
Yeah, but it turns out to be Chevrolet.
Well, Louis gave his name away, right?
Yeah.
And he wanted to make a race car named after that governor named Frontenac. Mm-hmm. And Frontenac cars that Louis made won the Indy 500 in 1920 and 1921.
This book is full of accounts of history, but there's also love triangles in here, too. It's almost like a soap opera.
Yeah.
When you think about the different affairs that Albert Champion had.
Right, and they caused a tremendous sensation. And I reproduced one of the newspaper clips showing Albert's wife, who must have been mortified at having her picture next to the amour, and because Albert's wife called him a villain.
Yes, I saw that in that newspaper article that you have in the book. Also, there's a connection to Charles Lindbergh, too.
Right. Albert Champion supplied the spark plugs that Lindbergh used to fly across the Atlantic. Albert Champion, with his plant in Flint, Michigan, employing 3,500 people, making spark plugs Albert had patents for. Albert figured out that the amount of time that it would take Lindbergh to fly across the Atlantic, averaging 115 miles an hour, his plane would need 29,944,000 perfect sparks. And Albert made spark plugs for the Spirit of St. Louis. It turns out also that the next two pilots who flew across the Atlantic, Chamberlain and Byrd, they flew like at 3 or 4 week intervals following Charles Lindbergh, also had AC spark plugs.
And he figured out the number of sparks that the spark plug would need to produce to fly across the Atlantic.
Right, to keep Lindbergh's plane
in the air.
Yeah.
In the air. So he developed a spark plug that would last long enough.
Yeah. He did, and then it was 5, and so when Lindbergh flew across the Atlantic, Albert Champion was a tremendous Franco-American business success. Former bicycle courier, now making the spark plugs for Lindbergh flying across the Atlantic, and then soon after Chamberlain and Byrd also flew across the Atlantic. 5 months after Lindbergh flew across the Atlantic, Albert died suddenly.
So he didn't get to bask in the glory very long.
He had a lot of glory. Glory in French, la gloire. That was his motivation all his life, beginning from age 11. He was basking in glory. He started out as a unicyclist, doing stunts, trick riding, at age 11.
Well, you really know his life. You were fascinated with the man.
I was, and also the changing times, because once automobiles started to be made in the United States, which is shortly after around 1900, the U.S. Census in 1900 had numbered automobiles in the United States, a total automobile production in the United States of 8,000 cars. That was all we had in the United States. So the U.S. Census Bureau, in 1900 census, lumped automobiles under miscellaneous. But by 1920, automobiles were the biggest industry, and with automobiles came the growth of the steel industry, the rubber industry, and where would Texas be without gas for cars? Mm-hmm. And Albert was right there in the middle of all of that.
And it's all documented in this book. So
right.
if you want a good read and you want to have a little bit of history, in fact, a lot of history along with it, it's called The Fast Times of Albert Champion by Peter Nye. And where can they get the book?
Anywhere where books are sold. Was very good distribution.
Okay.
Your favorite bookstore, an independent bookstore, or
on Amazon.com too.
Right.
Okay. So you got another book in the making?
Yes, I'm working on one. The person I'm presently working on has a cameo role in here.
Okay. All right. But it's The Fast Times of Albert Champion. Thank you so much, Peter Nye,
Thank
for
you.
coming down here, and thanks for listening to KBIA too.
Oh yes.
Becoming a member there, or staying a member. Our program directed by Travis McMillen, Reynolds Journalism Institute. Audio is Pat Akers from KBIA. Our floor director, Maya Jackson, and our assistant producer and guest coordinator, Uncle James Mauser. Tomorrow, we're going to meet the Dean of the School of Performing Arts, Stevens College. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.